Okay, so good morning. So we're starting a new siman now, Reish Pei Hey. This is the halacha, the siman of Shnayim, Mikra ve'echad targum, the well-known halacha. It seems that there's people struggle with this one. It's like marumas in the actual siman Rafa. Rafa means weak. So hopefully we'll be mechazik it. Siman Reish Pei Hey, Likra Parsha Shnayim Mikra ve'echad targum. Says the Mechaba, Aleph. Afal pi she'adam shomea kol haTorah kula kol Shabbos b'tzibur. Even though a person hears Kriyas HaTorah every single week, Chayev likros la'atzmim b'chol shavua parshas oisa shavua. A person is obligated to read for himself the parsha of that coming week. Shnayim Mikra ve'echad targum, to read each pasuk twice and once the targum. But afilu ataras v'divan, even those words. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah. What's that mean? Likros la'atzmim b'chol shavua. Hainu. Shelo yakdim likros kodim oisa shavua. You shouldn't read to oisa shavua v'gam lo yachi. You shouldn't do it too early, too late. So you can't read last week's and you can't read next week's. You got to be, that week is for that Shabbos. Tzorech lahashim pashas of im hatzibur. V'chol hamashim pashas im hatzibur manrichin layomov v'shneisov. It's a Gemara in Brachas, I think. That's Shabbos. That it's a very it's a special bracha. You know, people do all different types of things for brachas. But the name Shnayim Mikra is actually is brought in the Gemara itself. So a couple of interesting ha'aras. So if we go to the back, this is page 21. So first of all, number 2. What is the makar of this obligation to say Shnayim Mikra ve'echad targum? So he says in footnote 2, makar chi of takonazu kosav Orach HaShulchan sheMoshe tikna b'shar shetikin likra b'Torah. When Moshe Rabbeinu is misakin to do Kriyas HaTorah, that means you shouldn't go 3 days without Torah. That's Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos morning. Ezra was also misakin Shabbos afternoon. We shouldn't be Yoshev Batel. But when, as part of that institution by Moshe Rabbeinu, he also instituted Shnayim Mikra ve'echad targum, says the Orach HaShulchan. V'atam shetiknu likra Shnayim Mikra ve'echad targum. What is the reason why did he institute it? So a few reasons. Kotzav HaBeis Yosef shel kadeshi heiragel b'masha tzibur keirim. That you're familiar with what's the coming parasha, that you're familiar with the themes, the stories. V'alavush kotzav shel kadeshi baki v'ragel b'Torah. Stam, that's a person should know Torah. There are other reasons given that if the Golker doesn't show up or something, that you're a bit familiar with it, and therefore you've practiced it a couple of times before, just in case. And there are enough kaminas. Okay. Oh, sorry, there was one more hara, and number 3, which is an interesting one. What about a child? Is a child obligated? Is there chinuch in Shnayim Mikra? So he says, "V'gam koten shegil gil chinuch." The Shevet Halevi writes, "Sheyesh lahargila lahagbid likra Shnayim Mikra gam pirush Rashi." You should try and encourage children to do it as well. Shedov zeh mevi liyiras Hashem tahira. That certainly learning with Rashi as well is auspicious for yiras Shamayim, for tahara. V'chein hira agon Rishlam Zaban Arbach. V'gam Talmud Chacham, even a Talmud Chacham who's sort of, he says here, shechosh ganavshel lisamik b'Talmud, he wants to learn with more depth, that he should also be very makbid on Shnayim Mikra. And you hear all the Gedolim do it. You know, you see Rabbi Yashav would go off every Friday morning, and he would do it. Even though they would perhaps want to learn with more depth, but then it takes time, Shnayim Mikra, but they would be very particular about it. For Gambli Torah, Shalom Dim Kol Hayom, Kosav B'Shal Shuv Zikros Moshe, Shechayov B'Kriyas Shnayim Mikra ve'echad targum, V'Hoisiv Shechiv Zeh, Shechayev b'zeh afilu mi sheteroso amnosei k'Rishim ben Yochai v'chaver. Even if you're learning the whole day, you still have an obligation to do it. Now, what about an ovel? Rahman al-Islam, a person is an ovel, so normally an ovel can't learn Torah. So what does he do about Shnayim Mikra? So he says, ovel b'toich shivas yimei avilosei kosva shulchan aruch v'ashach shetzorich likros b'Shabbos Shnayim Mikra ve'echad targum. He should do it on Shabbos. For him, it's like Seder Tefillah. That's and therefore he, just like he's going to daven, he's going to say Shnayim Mikra, etc. He's able to do it even on the Shabbos with Rashi, if that's his normal. Okay, there are those who argue, but that's that. Okay, let's carry on. Okay, Sif Cotton Base, Shnayim Mikra, Avalo Yikra Echod Mikra ve'echad targum. Now, the question is, do you have to read the Mikra twice? So the Mishnah Berurah says, ideally you should read exactly what the Machaba says, that Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. Lo yikra echad Mikra ve'echad Targum, and don't read the Mikra once and the Targum once, v'yichavan l'shmoya ma'ashliach tzibur, and it's tzarich likra's base pa'omim Mikra chutz m'mash l'shmoya shliach tzibur. So you read it twice, and then that's separate from what the shliach tzibur does. V'lo shekara gamkein oz gamkein b'fiv, unless you actually sort of verbally, you're actually reading it and saying it with him. V'ayim Magen Avram, Sif Kotzen Ches, Shekosov, B'Shem Lechem Chamudos, Sheb'diavad, B'diavad Yotze Pamachas Masha Shom Meshlech Tzibur. The B'diavad, if you do the Shnayim Mikra once and you do the Targum once, and then you have in mind when the Golker is reading, that's okay. V'yesh Machronim Shemachrin Afilu B'diavad. They say even not. He brings in the back of Nissim Kareles. He says because they're two different chiyuvim. One is the chiyuv to hear Kriyas HaTorah, and one is to say Shnayim Mikra. And never the twain shall meet. But there are those who are makel. I personally am makel and do it, and I say Shnayim Mikra once and Targum once, and I read quietly along with the Golker. Just time-wise, it takes time, and therefore I sometimes struggle with time, and therefore I do that. And there's certainly grounds to do that. Ube'inyan hakriya yesh deis bezeh bin achronim. Now the question is, how do you actually do it? So yesh omrim sheikra kol pasuk beis palmim v'targum olav. There are those who say that you should read each pasuk twice, then do the targum. He says in the footnote at the back that the Shevet Halevi brings Eidus that the Chavetz Chaim himself, the author of the Mishnah Berurah, would do it this way. He would read pasuk, targum, Rashi, Ramban. That's how he would do it. Okay, so that's the first way. V'yesh omrim sheikra kol parsha beis pa'amim v'achach targum. You'd read the parsha twice and then the targum. Hainu sheikra kol parsha pesucha pesusumo. Beis pa'amim v'achach targum. So it doesn't mean you read Rishon and then Sheni and then Shlishi, but rather each parsha, whether it's pesucha or whether it's susuma. Of a Magen Avram, a Bashari Tshuva Mitzadim Kadei Rishona, that you do pasuk by pasuk. Of a Sefer Maiserav, Isa Shahagron Nog Lemi Hatargum Acha Kol Parsha Pesucha Yisuma. He would do it the other way. Acha Makom Shero Yosef Hefsa Kanyan, wherever he felt it was the end of a theme or a storyline or whatever, he would read the parsha till there, and then he would stop, and then he would go back and do the targum. V'David Kamar Ovid, V'David Kamar Ovid. That whichever way you choose, whatever works for you is okay. I saw also, he says in the back that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says that you could do both. You could do Shnayim Mikra. So you could read one time the whole parsha, and then the whole targum, and then or then pasuk by pasuk. In other words, you read the whole parsha once, and then you do pasuk targum. Is how you do it. So there are lots of different permutations. Mishu baki b'tam of a nekudas balpeh, someone who's a proficient balkera, toiv lahad likras b'sefer Torah gufa. That it's better to do Shnayim Mikra from a sefer Torah. Yossi. Yeah, if you have that in mind. Yeah, if you're mechaber to that.
Doing it more than Shnayim Mikra.
Yeah. Kalamar b'hazer meshuach. The divain. Well, I don't know. If you're preparing for Kriyas HaTorah. Yes. But can you use that for your Shnayim Mikra? Then for sure. Yeah, if that's your one, yeah. V'diva in as far as I know, v'diva in Rotzelema afal pish ein bo targum. Now these words they don't have targum. V'uadin Reuven v'Shimon in the beginning of Parsha Shmos, for example, v'chayetz b'zeh tzorech likros gimel pa'amim. That means when the targum is just the words Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. So just do the targum because it's the same as saying the pasuk 3 times because the targum is just the words. V'yesh machmim to be'itros v'davin shish v'targum Yerushalmi tzorech likros shama targum. But the Maisa Art Targum brings that, so that seems to be sufficient. Okay, let's just do base. Now, says the Mechaba, Im Lomad HaParsha B'Pirish Rashi. A person learns Rashi, as one tries to try and do each week. Choshev Kamo Targum. That could count as Targum. Yirei Shemaim Yikra Targum V'Gam Pirish Rashi. A person, Yirei Shemaim, should do Targum and Rashi as well. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Pirish Rashi, Shu Mefarish Mikra, because Rashi explains the pshat in the pasuk. Like the Targum does, but even more. But if you just read the English translation, you read your Art Scroll translation, which is a good thing to do, it's very nice, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help for this. It just translates the words. That doesn't count as Targum. It's got to be like a pirush. But reading Rashi is choshev k'mo targum, says Rashi. It says Mishnah Berurah, hey, v'alkein yetz masha kurish nepam mikra echod l'pirush Rashi, and therefore in lieu of Targum, you could just read the pasuk with Rashi. Now, the problem is this: for oisim psukim she'en aleim pirush Rashi, you sometimes come across psukim which have no Rashi on them. Then Yikra is Shalosh problem. Then you got to read the Targum on that pasuk. So it does get a bit complicated, and your best bet is just to read Shnayim Mikra, Echad Targum, and Rashi if you can. Misha Eina Bar Hochi Sheyovan is Perish Rashi. Someone who's not able to understand Rashi, very likris Perish Tertish Bloshna Ashkenaz Bizmanenu. You can read the contemporary translations. Kagain Sefer Senorena in the back in the day. Ochiyot Ziboy Hamavarim is Parsha Al Pish Perish Rashi or Shach Chachmenu Zazal Habnuim Al Soid HaTalmud with all the various Chazal. Targum Gam Perish Rashi. Because each one has a maila. The Targum has a maila. Shenitan Basinai. It was from Har Sinai. V'gam hu mefurish al kol mila mila. It translates every single word. Pirish Rashi yesh maila. And the Rashi has a maila. Shu mefarish is inyan al pi midrashi Chazal. Yosem Targum. It's more explanatory than the Targum. Ube'emes kein roi linoy l'chol adam. Really, every single person should try and do this. Shnayim Mikra Echad Targum and Rashi. Sheyilmud b'chol shavua hasidra im Pirish Rashi levad haTargum. Aside and in addition to the Targum. Ki yesh kama parshas Batorah v'prat chelik b'chelik v'yikra she'ef sh'lefay avinam klal l'dei Targum lechud. Because you can't really understand the Chumash without Rashi. It's a different Shabbos. You go into Shabbos having learned Rashi, it's a different Shabbos. Mi she'en biyod the Targum rak chumash levad. If the person only has a chumash to hand, yesh levad yesh la yikra shnei pam mikra. Then you read the pasuk twice. V'achach shizam le Targum yom, and then later you come across the Targum, you can do it. Lo yikra pasuk hamu uchur. You should read it in order. You should read the Mikra first and then the Targum. If you can do it without a gap, a break at all, in one shot, that's preferable. Very interesting footnote in 20. He goes, Misha Noag Likres Kol Yoim B'chelik Mea Parsha. So if you have, like I do, you try and do whenever you can, right? It's so you read, let's say, like some people do Rishon on Sunday, Sheni on Monday, or whatever you can do. For Commission Kosov Lahalon, Kosov Hagon Rucham Kanievsky, Shevadai Mutil Lahafsik Lachashisim. You have to be mafsik from one to the next. You can't talk the whole day. Yeah, so then of course that's not a problem. What it means is Rakim Minhaga Rak Kola Parsha B'Ritzifas Lehavsik. What this is referring to, if you're doing the whole parsha in one shot, then it's a hidur to try and do it without interruption. And then he says, "Vanishal be'emsa kriya sheila b'halacha." If someone comes over to you and asks you a shaila halacha whilst you're in the middle of Shnayim Mikra, hiragam Shlemizam Arbach shalov lehoishiv lahashiv l'shol. You should certainly respond. Shari yesh bekach gam mishum mitzvah b'chesed min ha'Torah. It's a chesed to respond to somebody. V'hoisiv shemuta gam lehafsik gam afshesikim mit Talmud Torah kagoyin lemitzvah veris. If there's other interruptions, the mitzvah veris, then you're allowed to. And also, are you allowed to drink when you're having Shnayim Mikra? I've always wondered about this. Margish tzimoin, you're thirsty. Kosov v'shad shuvas lev chaim. Kadei shatzimon lo yafriloi b'kriya Shnayim Mikra Targum mutar lahafsik v'lishleis levarich al hashtiya b'tchila v'seif. Very interesting. So if you're thirsty in the middle of Shnayim Mikra and you want to have a drink, you can make a bracha and you can bracha very nefashos at the end, because that's not an interruption. That's going to help your Shnayim Mikra ve'echot Targum. Okay, to be continued.